What is going on, Tentacrew? My name is Billy the Squid, and if you watched my patch 1.06 video, you know that I called that the most important patch FromSoftware has ever put out for multiplayer in the Souls-like games. Well, with patch 1.07, FromSoftware told me to hold their beer and watch this. And I genuinely think that with the combination of patch 1.06 and 1.07, FromSoftware is determined to make Elden Ring the PvP Souls-like for years to come. So if you haven't watched my patch 1.06 video, I highly recommend you do that. But the short and dirty of it was they made it so that invasions and co-op were now global throughout the game. As long as you have unlocked an area, you could transport yourself to those areas for both co-op and invasions without having to actually bounce around. The game basically does that for you, increasing the odds of actually getting into co-op and invasion sessions. And this was all fine and dandy, but there was still the glaring issue of the PvP balancing. PvE, they're still going to keep working on until two players can't just jump attack with bleed builds over and over a boss and kill it in like 15 seconds. That's still something they're working on. But as far as PvP went, one-shots were still way too common, especially in the upper levels of PvP. We're talking about the 150 to 200 range, where Ashes of War basically are insta-wins if you hit your ability, and that's just not fun. There's no counterplay to that. If you make one mistake, you're done. And there is always the get good argument with this, but I feel like with PvP, it's already so niche to begin with that any frustration factor that could make it so that people run away from PvP and invasions is not a good thing to keep going. What makes it even worse is that with invasions, Elden Ring basically makes you go into gang squads. So if you get hit from an Ash of War from behind, or you're just surrounded by AoEs, there's little to nothing that you can do about it. But with patch 1.07, hopefully we are seeing a turn towards the better when it comes to PvP and invasions, because with this patch, they made it so that PvP now will have its own separate scaling, independent from PvE, and all players should be rejoicing. This is good for literally everybody that plays the game, whether you are a PvE specific player or you're somebody that dabbles in PvP or you play these games exclusively for PvP. Everybody wins with this patch, and I'm going to explain why. Well, unless you're Fri HERE, of course, because patch 1.07 basically made it so you have to fake twice as many numbers now. Good luck, guys. I believe in you. But while Fri HERE is molding having to hit the random number generator twice as many times as normal, we get a better gaming ecosystem overall in Elden Ring. Let me explain. In patch 1.07, we have separate scaling for PvP and PvE. This is only going to work one way, so any changes that are made specifically for the PvP side of things will only affect PvP. But any changes that are made to weapons, spells, Ashes of War, or whatnot in the PvE cycle will still affect the PvP side of things. This is important to note. So if your favorite weapon or spell gets a buff in PvE, it is also going to be a buff in PvP. But if FromSoftware determines that that buff, they only want it to affect PvE, they will make it so that the PvP scaling of that will either remain the same or get reduced based on what they feel is appropriate for that spell in a PvP situation. And for all of you jolly cooperators out there, don't worry, none of these changes for the PvP side of things are going to be affecting your co-op play either. So if you're summoned into somebody's world, you're not going to have your spells neutered because you are in a multiplayer setting. This is specifically for PvP multiplayer. And with this patch potentially breathing new life into the PvP scene of Elden Ring, the first casualty is actually the breath spells of the dragons. They told them, your breath stinks, have a tic-tac, calm down, because every single one of the dragon breath spells, whether it is the base level or the legendary dragon variety, are all getting nerfed in PvP specifically across the board. It is also worth noting that the stinkiest of the stinky as far as the breaths went and got a teeth cleaning from the dentist, because Rotten Breath and XX Decay also got nerfed in PvE overall. That was the only one of those spells that actually took a PvE hit. And the reason I say that this is good for all facets of Elden Ring, not just the PvE spectrum, is because with them being able to have this separate scaling for PvP if they see fit, they have actually went and buffed almost every spell that Elden Ring has. Even some spells that they had previously nerfed into the ground, they brought it back up, because now if it determined that it's going to wreak havoc in PvP, they'll just bring it down independently. So now you truly can have your cake and eat it too, because all those powerhouse PvE spells hopefully will be brought back up to their former glory, while also not one-shotting people in PvP settings. As far as Ashes of War goes, it was a long, hard night at the FromSoftware slaughterhouse as far as PvP goes, because with a few exceptions, Ashes of War across the board were reduced to mere shadows of their former glory. But with every ebb, there is also flow. And as far as PvE goes, Ashes of War got brought up pretty well across the board, even bringing back some of the ones that they nerfed previously because of PvE situations, such as Glintstone Pebble Ash of War. And I don't want you all to think that these Ash of War nerfs for PvP are a bad thing. Au contraire. This is actually one of the best things they could have done for the PvP scene, just because of the way that Ashes of War work in Elden Ring. Ashes of War are a funny little thing as far as Elden Ring goes, because as far as I'm aware, it is the only thing that actually does not scale off of a person's base stats, or at least not as heavily off of base stats as it should. It primarily scales off of the weapon's level. This is why in speedruns and challenge runs and stuff like that, you'll see people rushing somber weapons because you only need to get them to +9 or +10 to be able to effectively use their Ash of War. Meanwhile, standard weapons having to go up to +25, it takes much longer for those Ashes of War to actually hit their peak than it does for those somber weapons. And this is a very easy way for players to put maximum points into defensive stats while also being able to get big boy damage out of their weapons simply by having a high level weapon with a very powerful Ash of War onto it. And this is the way the upper level PvP scene worked. You would have big armor because you could put a bunch of points into your carrying capacity, and then basically you took little to no damage from standard attacks from enemies, but your weapon art did ridiculous damage, sometimes one-shotting people. And speaking of heavy armor and poise, FromSoftware has actually increased the poise damage that players do to enemies that are having that heavy armor on. So they won't be able to tank 2 hits most of the time. You'll only be able to tank 1 if you are speccing into a poise specific build. This still gives people that want to invest in poise that slight advantage where they can tank through a hit, but they're not going to be able to full combo people like they used to be able to. A little more give and take to cut down on some of the frustration factors that have rammed people off of the Elden Ring PvP scene. But with all of these changes, do I think that this is going to magically overnight revive the Elden Ring PvP scene? No, I do not. I do think it had a significant uptick in the Elden Ring PvP scene. I do believe it brought a bunch of the PvP interested players back to Elden Ring, but as far as it goes right now, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in the balancing section for PvP to really hit peak glory of a Souls-like. I still believe Dark Souls 2 had the best PvP, and I hope Elden Ring can one day get to that level of balanced as far as the PvP goes. And once again, like I mentioned in that patch 1.06 video, this is all coming out in a standard patch, which still blows my mind. Major background changes are happening to the game on a patch by patch basis. So really, the sky is the limit for whatever FromSoftware wants to do. Now that they have fixed all of the issues with the prior game servers and all of those games are back online for the most part, they can full send into working on the Elden Ring servers, Elden Ring patching, and making it the best game that it could possibly be, especially considering that there's a DLC around the corner that people are just waiting and waiting for. But how long will FromSoftware edge us for? Only time will tell, but I hope that at least while we're being edged for a DLC, we keep getting significant patches like this, because it is only making the game a better place for new and old players, and hopefully more old players will come back, especially once that DLC gets announced. But if you enjoyed the video, please like it, subscribe to the channel if you want more Elden Ring content. Until next time, Tenna Crew, much love. Bye-bye.